We continue now at the top of Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph in Meseches Sotah. This is Sotah Daf 16a. Isi ben Yehuda says the reason why it says Bekarka HaMishkan when it talks about the dirt that you put into the bitter waters that the Sotah is going to drink is to include Shiloh, Nov, V'Givon, U'Beis Olamim. It's not only the Mishkan, but it's also the Mishkan that was at Shiloh and at Nov and at Givon, and the Beis Olamim refers to the Beis HaMikdash. And we'll take a look at Rashi over here on the previous Amud. Rashi says, Bekarka HaMishkan Isi ben Yehuda, Bekarka HaMishkan Lamai Asa. What do we learn from the words Bekarka HaMishkan? Kevan Dialfinan Me Asher Yeh, since we learn from Asher Yeh, the Ein Sarech Litlo Me Al Gabi Karkois, because Isi ben Yehuda is saying that you don't need to actually take the dirt from the earth by the Beis HaMikdash. You can actually bring in the earth from the outside. Again, that's the Machlokas Tanoim over here. Where do we get the dirt that we're going to be putting into the waters? So Rashi explains, Isi ben Yehuda Omer Lahavi Beis Karka Olamim. Isi ben Yehuda says it comes to include the land of the Beis HaMikdash, a slightly different girsa than we have. Hachi Garsinan La B'Sifri. This is the girsa in the Sifri. V'lo Garas L'Rabos Shiloh V'Nov V'Givon Beis Olamim. Don't have the girsa that it's coming to include Shiloh, Nov, and Givon in the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi explains why. The Shiloh Mishkanu, because Shiloh was a Mishkan. V'lo Tzarech L'Ribu. You don't need to include Shiloh. The pasuk is talking about the Mishkan. There's nothing to include. Duikar Hakosov. That's what the pasuk is talking about. V'Nov V'Givon. When it comes to Nov and Givon, so Ein Mashkin Ben Sotos. There is no giving to drink to the Sotah in Nov and Givon. To Habama Havai, because that had the status of a bum of an outside altar. V'lo Havisham Aron. There was no Aron there. Elam Mizbeach HaNechoshes Levada. It was just the Mizbeach HaNechoshes. V'lo Karva Ben Minchasot, and there was no Minchasot that was brought there. V'lo Shum Chovas Yachid. There was no Chovas Yachid. No individual obligations were brought over there. She'ein and lo Zman Kavu. If it didn't have a Zman Kavu, Ked Amar B'Shchitas Kachim Uve Megillah, like we say in Shchitas Kachim, in Zvachim and in Meseches Megillah. Aval Beis Olamim. Now, when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, however, Hotzrich L'Rabos, that we need a drasha to include. Shelo Tomer, you shouldn't say Mishkan Nemar V'lo Mikdash. Maybe you'll say this halacha only applies to the Mishkan and not the Mikdash. We say no, it applies to the Beis HaMikdash as well. Beis HaMikdash should be Yerushalayim Kari Le Beis Olamim. And Rashi says the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, that's referred to as the Beis Olamim L'fi She'ein Achar Kedushaso Heter B'Makom Achar, because after that's sanctified, you can't do it anywhere else. V'shuv Lo Sharsa Shechina B'Makom Achar. The Shechina is not going to rest anywhere else after the Beis HaMikdash. And the Brisa continues, Isi ben Menachem Omer, Isi ben Menachem says, Eino tzarech, it's not necessary. Rashi says, Eino tzarech l'rabos beis olam. We don't need an extra drasha to include the Beis HaMikdash. And the reason is because we know it for the following reason. Uma betuma kala, lo chilek hakasav betumas eishes ish chamur, lo kol shekain. If when it comes to regular tumah, more lenient tumah, we don't make a distinction between the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. So when it comes to something more strict, like eishes ish, like this case of adultery here, so certainly it's going to be included, the Beis HaMikdash. You don't need a drasha to include it. And Rashi says, to enter when a person is tamei into the Beis HaMikdash, she'ena b'misas bezin ela kares. That's not misas bezin, that's just kares. Lo chilek hakasav bein mikdash lemishkan. There's no distinction made between the mikdash and the mishkan. Shenemru b'parshas paraduma shnei psukim. It says two psukim as if there's no distinction. It says ki es mikdash Hashem timei, as mishkan Hashem timei. It talks about the mikdash, it talks about the mishkan as if they're the same. So lo kol shekain. So certainly the same is going to be true in our case of Sotah. Shahushvu mikdash or mishkan levodko levar mitochan. That the mikdash and mishkan are going to be the same in terms of the halachas of Sotah. And so therefore Isi ben Menachem continues, Imkain, if so, matam adlamar bekarka hamishkan. Why does it say bekarka hamishkan? And it means, again, the opposite. And as we said before, what Isi ben Menachem is about to say is the same thing that we said in the earlier brisa on the previous Amud, shelo yavi mitoch kupaso, that the person shouldn't bring from the outside in. You don't bring the loose dirt in. You're getting that dirt from the earth of the Beis HaMikdash itself. And Rashi says, "Mkein matam alomer bekarka shelo yavi mitoch kupaso l'soch kli." You don't take it directly from his own kupa, his own basket, and put it into this kli. V'yachnes l'heichel and bring it into the heichel that way. Elamar mikarki also yitol. Rather, what you do is again you have to take from the earth of the mishkan or the mikdash. V'mein sham. Now, if you don't have any loose dirt over there, so yavi v'yaniach sham. So then you bring in from the outside. You put the dirt onto the floor. You don't put it directly from the kupa into the kli. You got to put it first onto the floor of the Mishkan or Mikdash, and then you put it into the Kli. And according to this approach, we'll fulfill both the pasuk of Asher and both Bekarka, and again that follows the same as we said in the earlier brisa on the previous Amud. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Ein Sham Offer, let's say there's no dirt over there, so Mahu Sheyitein Efer. So what's the halacha? Can you use Efer? Can you use ashes? And the Gemara says, "I'll leave it to Beis Shammai lo tiboilach." According to Beis Shammai, it's not a question. The Amri, because they say lo matzino efer shakari offer, we don't find that efer is interchangeable with offer, so therefore it cannot be used. Ki tiboilach, I'll leave it to Beis Hillel. The question really is only according to Beis Hillel. The Amri, because they say matzino efer shakari offer, we find sometimes that efer, ashes, are referred to as offer. It's referred to as dirt. So what would be the halacha? Again, is the efer interchangeable with the offer? Alfagav the ikri offer, maybe you'll say even though it's called offer, it's called dirt, but hacha bekarka hamishkan, because here it does say karka hamishkan, it says the earth of the mishkan, so maybe it specifically has to be offer, it cannot be afer, it cannot be ashes. O dilmar, maybe hai bekarka hamishkan l'chidi isi ben Yehuda, or l'chidi isi ben Menachem huda asir. Maybe no, the phrase bekarka hamishkan in the pasuk, that's coming to teach us either the teaching of isi ben Yehuda or isi ben Menachem, but it does not mean to say that it has to dafka be offer and not afer. And Rashi explains, pluksa the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'shchitas chulin, the machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is in Meseches chulin, gabe kisei hadam, by the mitzvah of covering up the blood. Aliva the Beis Hillel the amri afer kari offer. According to Beis Hillel, they say afer is called offer, and we see that in the pasuk. T'chsiv v'lachu latame me'afar sreifas hachatos. It's talking there about afer, and it calls it offer. It says offer sreifas hachatos. Beis Shammai say that pasuk's not a proof. Offer sreifa nikr, because that pasuk it says offer sreifa, offer stama lo ikri. It doesn't say just the word offer, and so therefore they say we don't find that afer is called offer. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following, Da'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, B'shlosha mekomos halacha keves mikra. In 3 places, the halacha supersedes the straightforward meaning of the psukim. HaTorah Amra Ba'afar, the Torah says when it comes to Kisei Adam that dirt has to be used to cover up the blood. V'halacha b'chol davar, but the halacha is anything is able to be used. HaTorah Amra, the Torah says Besar, when it's talking about a Nazir, it says he can't remove his hair with a tar, with a razor. V'halacha b'chol davar, the halacha is the prohibition applies if anything is used. And finally, HaTorah Amra Sefer, the Torah says a scroll should be used when you're writing a get. V'halacha b'chol davar, but the halacha is that anything can be used. And so the Gemara now says, V'imisa, now if it is true, meaning to say, if it is true that here in our case as well, you don't have to actually use offer when you put into the water, into the sotah water, you can use anything, you can use afer. So lichshov nami hai, so this should also be included. It should not be 3 things, it should be 4 things. Rather, what's implied from over here is that it's only in these 3 places, but when it comes to the sotah water, afer is not able to be used. And the Gemara says it's not necessarily a proof, ton of a shire, because you could say we have a teaching of 3 things, but we left out, it's not all things. These are 3 cases, and there are other cases as well that we left off. But the Gemara says, Umay shire, dahai shire, but what else was left off that you're claiming that this was left off? You can't say that only 1 case is left off. And the Gemara says, shire mitzorah, we're leaving out mitzorah. That's another situation where the halacha supersedes the straightforward meaning of the psukim. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Vayeh bayom hashvi yigalech, it's called sa'aro klal. It says that the mitzorah on the 7th day shaves all of his hair. That's a generalization. As Roshov, as Zakonov, as Gabo Zainov, then it says he shaves his head, and it says he shaves his beard, and it says he shaves the hair by his eyes. Prat, that's a specific. That's called Sari Galeach, and then it says that he shaves all of his hair. So that's Chazaru Klal. That's another generalization, and that's what we call a Klalu Pratu Klal. It's called a Klal Pratu Klal, a generalization followed by when we're specific, followed by another generalization. And the halach in those cases is Iyat Adon Elakain HaPrat, that we understand it to mean anything similar to the prat, anything similar to what we specified, which would mean as follows: Ma prat meforosh makom kinosar. Just like the prat is an area where there's a gathering of hair, venera, and it's visible. We're pointing out cases in the psukim, when we have the prats, we're pointing out situations where there's a stronger gathering of hair in one place, and it's also visible. So afkal makom kinosar venera. So too it has to be that you're shaving any area where there's a gathering of hair that's visible. And what does that mean? Ma Rabbi, so what's being included? So Rabbi Seir Haglaim, we're including Seir Haglaim, the hair of the feet. That refers to the pubic hair, it refers to the hair by the aver. And my Miet, and what's being excluded, Miet the Beis HaShechi, we're excluding the armpit hair because that is not visible. Udekule Gufe, and we're also excluding the hair that's throughout the body, but it's not gathered in one place. That we're also excluding. So that, the Gemara right now is considering this the straightforward meaning of the psukim, that you don't have to shave. The Mitzorah doesn't shave all of his hair. The Mitzorah shaves all of these areas where it's visible and where there's kinosar. But the Gemara continues, v'hilchasa, but the halacha actually supersedes this meaning of the psukim. Because the halacha is megaleach kedalas. The halacha is that the Mitzorah shaves like a gourd, meaning he shaves entirely all the hair on his body. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Bolo lahakif esamitzora, mavir taral kol b'saro. It says when they're coming to cut off the hair of the mitzora, they take a razor and they put it over his entire body. They remove all of his hair. The Katani Seif, and it says at the end, Uvayom Ashvi Megalcho. On the seventh day they shave him. There are two shavings by the mitzora. To glachas shniya, to glachas rishona. The second shaving is the same as the first shaving. So you see, by the second shaving as well, he shaves his entire body, all of the hair in his body. And so again, that supersedes. That seems to contradict the straightforward meaning of the psukim. So clearly that was left out of the statement of Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, and therefore we can say as well that also is left out this idea by the Efer Offer, by the waters of the Sotah. But the Gemara says, no, this is not, the case of Mitzorah is not really being left out. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Ki kachashiv halacha okeves mikra. Ha okeves midrabanan. We're only counting cases where the halacha supersedes the straightforward meaning of the psukim. Here, this is not the straightforward meaning of the psukim. We're using a klal uprado klal, that's midrabanan, so to speak. That's just a medrash of the psukim. So that's not counted in this as a fourth case, and it's not being left off, because it's not halacha superseding the straightforward meaning of the psukim. Rav Papa says a different explanation why the case of Mitzorah is not considered left out. Kika chashiv halacha keves ve'okeres. Because we're only counting cases, we're listing cases where it supersedes and uproots the straightforward meaning of the psukim. Ha'okeves u'mosevesi. Here we're superseding, but just adding. In other words, if you only had the klal u'prato klal, he wouldn't shave all of his hair, and we're adding other areas of hair that have to be shaved. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ashi says another answer why the case of Mitzorah shaving is not considered left out, because Hamas needs some money, because this Brisa, who is it? Rabbi Yishmael. It's Rabbi Yishmael, as we said, it was Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. The Darish Klal Uprat, he darshans Klal Uprat, meaning Rabbi Yishmael actually holds that a Mitzorah does not need to shave all the hair in his body, and that Mishnah that was quoted, Kidalas, that Mishnah that was quoted, they has to shave everything like a gourd, that doesn't follow Rabbi Yishmael, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tazayin Amud Beis.